reviewing every Fantastic Four movie. Sorry, I thought I had to start that like Mr. Beast. Hi, welcome to Film Stash. My name is Douglas Campbell. As I stated before, due to the new movie coming out and yet another iteration of the Fantastic Four, I decided to cover all Fantastic Four movies, you know, because no one's done that before. But unlike some of those other weirdos, I have a very prestigious rating system. Future Doug? Thanks, Doug. I'll take it from here. So, to rank each of these Fantastic Four movies on the level of their quality, I have scientifically devised this board, the Fantastic Four board. I've broken it down into 4 important categories that determine the quality of each of these films. Story. How good is the plot that utilizes these heroes? Family. This is Marvel's first family. Do they seem like an actual family? Doom. Because every family has an antagonist. And last but not least, the effects. / look of the Thing. How much do I believe these powers? I really like the Thing. I want to like the look of that thing. And altogether, each of these will be pointed on a scale of 1 out of 4 Fantastic Fours. It will add up to a final score of 16. And once I'm done ranking each of these films on the Fantastic Four board, I have a smaller Fantastic Four board where I will rank each of the 5 Fantastic Four films, worst to the best. All right, back to you, Doug. Thanks, Doug. Before we get too deep into it, don't forget to share this video, please like it, and hopefully you'll subscribe by the very end of this whole thing. Any help that you can give my channel, I would greatly appreciate it. If you're already subscribed, thank you so much for all your support. If you want to skip around throughout my review to see the different movies, the timestamps will be here. If you want to check out any of the articles that I used to form this video, they will be included in the link below. Now, without any further ado, let's dive into the Fantastic Four. Starting with
the Fantastic Four.
If you've lived chronically online, kind of like me, you probably have heard to death of this unreleased Fantastic Four movie. And if you are one of those few people that don't know about it, let me tell you. So within the 80s, producer Bernard Eichinger, he had the film rights to the Fantastic Four. Now, of course, he kind of left the property dormant. He didn't really use it. In like the early 90s, I believe around 1992, he was in danger of losing those film rights and it would just revert back to Marvel. And so to buy Bernard some more time, he sought the help of famous filmmaker and producer Roger Corman. If you don't know about Roger Corman, I really would recommend looking into him. He is famous for producing fast and cheap B movies. He has made so much B film schlock that has defined his whole career. And so he recruited Corman to make the Fantastic Four on a very tight budget of $1 million. Just $1 million. At the time of this recording in 2025, that would be like $2.2 million. That's a lot for an indie movie. That's not a lot for a Fantastic Four film. And so they just dove right into it. A script was written, characters were cast, they filmed at various locations. It was a very tight schedule from December 1992 to mid-January of 1993. And so they started promoting it just piece by piece, but it wasn't until the actors and the crew were about to premiere it that they got a cease and desist. They learned the really harsh truth that this film was never meant to be released. It was just meant to buy them some time just so they could eventually use the property. Hearing that, like, I would be incredibly insulted. Like, that is just so crazy to imagine. You put in all that hard work, you think it's gonna be like the jumpstart to your career, and then... But I did hear that those original Fantastic Four actors, they are going to cameo in the new Fantastic Four. So hopefully it brings attention to it. Hopefully it gives them a little bit of the justice they deserve. Maybe they'll put on Disney Plus. I hope they put on Disney Plus. There is a lot that is wrong with this film, and I'll dive into it here in a second. Doug? Thank you, Doug. As he mentioned before, we're covering right now Fantastic Four 1994. The story. There is no story. It's just a series of events strung together into 90 minutes that get all things of the Fantastic Four and just throw it on there without much of a natural rhyme or reason. The suits, how they get introduced? Not organic. They just throw it on before the final fight, because why else would you have suits? The only thing that really strings this into some kind of plot is just the fact that Dr. Doom, in a non-twist twist, Dr. Doom is super petty. One of my biggest strikes against the story is that this is all caused by what I can describe as Warwick Davis's Leprechaun stealing a diamond that they need for their space mission. It overcomplicates what should be really simple. That's kind of like some random guy tripping another guy who happens to be holding a gun in the same alley as the Waynes. Why overcomplicate that by adding in some random guy? No leprechaun. This gets a 1 out of 4 Fantastic Fours. Family! This is where things get kind of crazy. So Reed and Ben stay in this college town, and they are housed by Sue and Johnny's mom. Now, Sue and Johnny, at the time that Ben and Reed are going to college, they are early teenagers. And Sue is in love with Reed. They then recruit them years later to bring them up into space. Reed isn't sure whether they should go to space because they're civilians, until he sees how hot she is. That's disgusting. They also have no chemistry with each other. A 0 out of 4 Fantastic Fours. Doom! Actually, I'm gonna be real. I actually kind of like how Doom looks in this movie. It's very comic accurate. However, problem is, I don't know why I keep hitting this board. I can't understand what he's saying. He does big arm movements. So I kind of get the gist. This whole movie, everything that goes down, because Doom is being super petty towards an experiment that went wrong that he and Reed worked on. He is the only reason that this movie has a plot. You know what? 4 out of 4. Last but not least, I actually really like the look of the Thing in this movie. Anything practical, I like. However, towards the midpoint of the movie, he turns back into a human whenever he's confronted about someone he loves. Like, that's kind of weird. But also, for $1 million, that ain't bad. What you had to work with, it was pretty solid. We can't pretend that these are good. Like, the fire effect of Johnny towards the very end of the movie is awful. Sue barely does anything in the movie. She maybe turns invisible a couple times. My favorite thing is whenever Mr. Fantastic, he punches someone that's clearly like a couple feet in front of him. He didn't even need to use his stretchy powers. Although my favorite use of Mr. Fantastic powers, and they obviously have a stick with a glove out of the limousine, like that shit is great. A 1 out of 4 Fantastic Fours, which gives this movie a 6 out of 16 Fantastic Fours. I'm feeling kind of generous. Right now, I will put it at number 3. And back to you, Doug. Thank you, Doug. Well, look, despite how awful this film was, I do think there is a bit of a charm to this thing. It is on YouTube right now somewhere. I think there's a little bit of French dub, but I'd give this film like a 2 out of 10. Next up, we have a highlight from my childhood.
It's clobbering time!
It's catchy, right?
After the fallout of Roger Corman's Fantastic Four, Bernard joined forces with 20th Century Fox to adapt the characters for the big screen with an actual theatrical release. The project initially went to Chris Columbus, who did Gremlins, Goonies, first Harry Potter, Home Alone. The plans ultimately fell through. And after going through a couple of different creatives to get this project made, they did ultimately land on Tim Story to direct this film. He was famous for the film Barbershop and his American remake of Taxi. After a casting process that at one point in time almost saw Robert Downey Jr. as Dr. Doom, production was on without much of the difficulties of the Corman production. Basic story in theory, it isn't a terrible way to go about this type of origin story. In theory, it presents a few good character arcs, such as Ben's struggle with his new identity as a rock monster, the rekindling of Reed and Sue's relationship, Johnny learning to be more responsible, you know, the usual Fantastic Four stuff. It's too much for a 90-minute film. A lot of those really great arcs that I just described earlier, they get very minimal screen time because you only have 90 minutes to tell all of this. The film ends up feeling half-baked. We don't have enough time to really form a proper relationship with everybody. One of them needed to be the primary focus along with the inciting incident. In my opinion, it needed to be Ben Grimm's arc that got the main focus, because he's the one who's affected the most by this thing. And so to see Ben's gradual acceptance of his new look, I think it has the most narrative meat to the bones. So, Doug? Thank you, Doug. Things are looking a little uphill from here, at least compared to Roger Corman. This story, it's the same as the previous one, but done significantly better. It's a basic superhero origin story. The story is about the incident and them trying to return back to normalcy, which I think is pretty good for an origin story. It moves at a breakneck speed, and I don't know if you guys feel this way, you can comment below. It feels interestingly like sort of the early MCU days combined with Sam Raimi. It's kind of this weird in between. Pulled a couple strings, rewrite some things, and this could easily have been in phase 1 of the MCU. Seeing how everyone gets their powers, it adds a sense of discovery for the characters, it adds a sense of discovery for the audience. I would give this film 3 out of 4. Fantastic Fours. Family. I think the core 4 in this film is pretty great. I really like everybody in this thing. Even the weakest link, which admittedly I think is Jessica Alba, I don't think she's the absolute worst thing of this film. And to kind of add to that theme of family, they do fight, they do bicker. By the very end of the movie, they all come together and each of them use one aspect of their power to take down Doom. I think that's great. This gets 4 out of 4 Fantastic Fours. Next up we have Dr. Doom, played by Julian McMahon. They do kind of scale back his backstory a little bit. They do mention Latveria, but he is not the ruler of this country. But you know what? That's perfectly fine. However, they do give him the Norman Osborn motivation from the Sam Raimi Spider-Man trilogy. It works enough. It does make sense in terms of this radioactive storm, how it has financially ruined him. The performance, I think, it is solid for these movies. I think he does a really good job playing Doom. His costume, still very comic accurate, but, you know, a little sleeker. It's a nice look. 3 out of 4 Fantastic Fours. Now, the special effects, not all of it holds up. I think Reed, he probably is the one whose effects look the most dated today. Ben Grimm as the Thing. I think that look for the Thing is fantastic. It's practical. It looks really cool. I think the sound effects certainly add to the look of him being a rock monster. Could he be bigger? Sure. But I think that he looks really great. 3 out of 4 Fantastic Fours, which would give this a final score of 13 out of 16 Fantastic Fours. This board is accurate. I would put 2005s at number 2 for now. And back to you, Doug. Thank you, Doug. I think this film, it is decent enough. It's not the greatest of all time, but it gets way too much hate online. This one, it does at least have the familial feel that I think these characters need. Maybe not so much the heart. It's a 5 out of 10. Like, it's all right. Approaching a budget of $100 million, this film was a financial success, grossing $333.5 million, which means...
Oh my God!
Next up, we have the Fantastic Four. Here we go again. Fantastic Four, more 4. The Silver Surfer and his 4. The 1, 2, 3, and 4. Yes, the Fantastic Four, Rise of the Silver Surfer. Because of the financial success of 2005's Fantastic Four, most of the original cast and production returned for this film. They did hire some new help, such as screenwriter Don Payne. He wrote the screenplay for this film, and at least according to this article that I found, he was a massive fan of the Silver Surfer and wanted to include him in the sequel. I've always loved the Surfer. I think he may be the most complex comic character of all time. He's mysterious, and he's powerful, and he's menacing, and he's aloof, but he's also thoughtful, and noble, and tragic. A lot of different things describing him. He's made this huge sacrifice, and yet he's bringing about the destruction of countless worlds and civilization. He feels guilty about it, but he has to have this zen-like detachment. Which I agree. In crafting the story, Payne took quite a bit of inspiration from the comics. He took inspiration from Fantastic Four Comics 48, issues 57 to 60, and the Ultimate Galactus trilogy. Part of the Galactus trilogy had Nick Fury recruiting the Fantastic Four to take on Galactus. And so Payne was going to include Nick Fury within that film. But because they would have had to pay significant money to use the rights of Nick Fury, they ultimately changed the Nick Fury character to be some random guy, General Hager, who was played by Andrew Brower from Brooklyn Nine-Nine. And even creature actor Doug Jones, who was in Hellboy and The Shape of Water, he played the physical body of the Silver Surfer, and then they dubbed his voiceover in post-production with Lawrence Fishburne. And production was on. And ultimately, this film, it's this weird in between because it does improve a lot on what came before. But kind of like what I described with the last two, this movie is way too short because of the runtime. All of their conflicts and arcs, they're kind of pushed to the side for this world-ending conflict that really doesn't feel that world-ending. Because on top of all that, you're splitting half the movie up for Reed and Sue's wedding. But the important questions that they bring up in their wedding, like What's their life going to be like, and whether they want to leave it all behind to start a family? We don't get much of a follow-up to that. We don't get much of a follow-up to these arcs because the main focus, rightfully so, it should be on the Silver Surfer and Galactus and this threat. You get like these arcs like Johnny trying to leave his childish antics behind. And also you get Michael Chiklis, who got pushed off way to the side. Like, he has nothing to do in this one, which I think that's insulting because I loved Michael Chiklis' thing. He hardly serves the plot at all. Like, he didn't even need to be there. And now let's go to the Fantastic Four board. Thank you, Douglas. So next up, we are covering the Fantastic Four, Rise of the Silver Surfer. Now, let's dive into the story. Galactus world-ending threat. Good. Reed and Sue's wedding. Good. Johnny's body swap. All right, we're kind of pushing things, but that's still fun. I could dig that. All of these together. That's the problem. All of these elements together, I think, are way too much. If this film were about 2 hours, maybe even pushing it almost to 2.5, all these elements could have worked together. But because it's 90 minutes, everything feels super squished. This gets a 2 out of 4 Fantastic Fours. Next up is the families. Everybody's still cast from the previous movies, so the chemistry's still there. And the wedding subplot, I think it certainly works in like pushing this family dynamic forward a little bit. Even them questioning whether they will still remain a group, I think that works within a family conflict. They certainly still feel like a family. But the problem is, you push Ben off to the side, and family does not abandon family. 2 out of 4 Fantastic Fours. Doom. Honestly, Doom is kind of a non-factor in this film. He hardly is given anything to do either, which I really think is a shame because you're wasting a good performance from Julian McMahon. Even with how fast they take him out and him being barely an element of the film, there really was no point of putting him in because Galactus and the Silver Surfer, they're enough. You thought you were doing a Magneto thing, it didn't work. 1 out of 4 Fantastic Fours. It is important to point out that, like, Julian McMahon, at the time of this recording, he did die earlier this month at the beginning of July due to complications of cancer. And it really is such a shame because I really did like his performance as Doctor Doom. Maybe not the most comic accurate, but I think that he did give a good performance with what was given to him. I think he did a very good job. Rest in peace. And last but not least, we have the special effects / look of the thing. These pretty much are the same effects that were carried over from the first one. Now, some of them, like Reed's stretching ability, they have improved greatly. Not everything holds up still, but what does hold up is the fucking Silver Surfer. He was so awesome. Now, I know that Don Payne, he really wanted to put him in, but the special effects crew, bravo. Like how he's done with practical effects and with the CG over him, you made this guy so cool. Like that chase between him and Johnny, it still holds up. It is fantastic. And even the damage that this board causes, like, it's crazy. The death of the general, like in the third act from Doctor Doom from using his board, like, it's brutal. 4 out of 4 Fantastic Fours. So this brings this film to a final score of a 9 out of 16. Truthfully, like, I think the story ultimately betrays this thing. I don't think it's the worst ever, but compared to the first one, I think maybe they bit off a little bit more than they could chew. 1994 to the number 4 slot, and I will put 2007 here. There we go. Back to you, Doug. Thank you, Douglas. This film just sort of came and went whenever I rewatched all these movies. Like, it felt like I was watching an alright episode of like a Fantastic Four TV show. They were a part of my childhood. I really enjoyed watching them and revisiting them. I had a great time seeing them again. Despite the quality though, I think it is a little bit of a shame that Fox didn't move forward with a third one. I would give this thing about a 4 out of 10. Now, with an increased budget of $130 million, this film, while it did okay, it slightly underperformed, making about $301 million worldwide. And so plans for a third film, they were scrapped. Instead, we got...
It's fantastic.
Say that again? Alright, so tell me if this sounds familiar. Working again to maintain the rights to the Fantastic Four, Fox decided to reboot the entire franchise. Again, in 2010, they announced this plan to reboot, and in 2013, they hired the director they thought would be right for the job, which was Josh Trank. At the time, Josh Trank, he was like a pretty hot up-and-coming director because Chronicle, that got like quite a bit of praise from many people, and it did pretty well too. Fox was like immediate to hop onto like, hey, do our Fantastic Four film. It's debatable whether Josh Trank actually likes the comics, but regardless though, Trank, when he went into Fan4stick, his main inspiration, it wasn't really anything with comics. Trank's main inspiration, it was Cronenberg films. I would say that the science fiction of it is a big thing that sets it apart from most of the other superhero genre films. I'm a huge David Cronenberg fan, and I have always viewed the Fantastic Four and the kind of weirdness that happens to these characters and how they're transformed to really fall in line more with a Cronenbergian science fiction tale of something horrible happening to your body and it transforming out of control. Keep that in mind, because Trank and writer Jeremy Slater, they were constantly at odds with the tone of this film. Because Trank wanted this like body horror superhero origin story, and Slater, he wanted to do something akin to the Avengers, something light, jokey, kind of, fun. And all throughout production, Trank was just constantly battling it out over creative control. And along that creative journey, Trank was just constantly fighting with everybody between 20th Century Fox and Slater and various actors. It was crazy. Supposedly $30 million was taken from the final budget, yet they had to reshoot the ending, which led to a whole bunch of more fights. And to give that pile of garbage the final kick to the curb that it just really did not need, the day of the film's release, Josh Trank tweeted this message onto Twitter. The day of the film's release. Yikes. Yikes. Honestly, like me researching into the behind the scenes drama, it was way more interesting than me actually watching the movie for this review. As someone who likes sci-fi and horror and superhero movies, and I especially love them when they're properly merged, I was kind of digging the middle section of the film whenever everything's just going wrong. But unfortunately, the rest of the film, it just doesn't have that great a setup or that great a payoff. It doesn't really get started. This film, despite a lot of things being done that were kind of cool, it felt even more pointless than the 90s Fantastic Four. This main cast, they had no camaraderie. None. Michael B. Jordan is fine. I like Michael B. Jordan. Him and Kate Mara's chemistry, it was non-existent. It was bad. I couldn't even tell they were brother and sister with how they were acting with each other. There wasn't much to like about this cast. There really wasn't an arc for anybody either. It was awful. Oh my god. Doug, take it away, please. Thanks, Doug. And now we got Fan4stick. Yay! Alright, let's start off with the story. It's really bad. It kind of starts off cute. You have sort of a Stranger Things vibe at the very beginning. But once they grow up and they're weirdly recruited to NASA from like the high school fucking science fair, it really just goes downhill from there. The movie is just super boring the entire time. Like the incident itself, and as I'm sure Doug mentioned before, like with the sci-fi, like everything going wrong, it's great. But then like the film just is not able to live up to that. And it's just boring. It's a movie about how we made this one thing happen and then nothing else happens. And then we rush to the very end because we gotta have some type of superheroing, and oh, we gotta clumsily set up the next sequel, and it's bad. 0 out of 4 Fantastic Fours. Family. Okay, this is a fucking joke. These guys have no chemistry with each other. They just... Honestly, it just seems like they all met that same day. You know what I mean? Where you're trying to be friendly, but you're not exactly clicking. It's just awful. And it's awful that this feeling is even felt with what are supposed to be like the brother and sister characters. And worst of all, you wasted Michael Jordan. You should be ashamed, sir! This gets a 0 out of 4. Fantastic Fours. Doom. He is also bad. Josh Trank's idea of bringing Dr. Doom to the modern age is by making him an edgelord guy who's living in his basement. It's really bad. And then whenever he does become Doom, like, he's just this weird guy who lives on a deserted planet with like a really big hood that does not look intimidating or good. The only thing that's a little bit redeeming, but I can't even say fully redeeming, one sequence in the movie whenever Doom is just blowing up heads in that hallway. That was really cool. He's a non-villain for a non-movie. 1 out of 4 Fantastic Fours. Get the fuck out of here. The one positive thing I can give this film is that the special effects in this thing, they look pretty good. I'm not sure how to feel about the power of Reed Richards to change into a different race. That's kind of weird. But regardless, like, the special effects look good, and I like just how huge the thing is. The CG on him looks pretty good. Although the problem with it is that he is not wearing pants. That is fucking weird. Whenever I see him on the screen, I'm just thinking he needs to be on a list somewhere. This gets a 4 out of 4 Fantastic Fours, which together brings us to our lowest score of a 5 out of 16 Fantastic Fours, which brings it down to our very bottom of the ranking. Back to you, Doug. Yeah, thank you, Doug. Yeah, this movie, it gets a 2 out of 10. And with a budget of $120 million, this movie bombed hard with a worldwide box office of $167.9 million, which scraped any ideas for a future sequel out of the way. Like, that shit was gone. Which now means we're moving into
famous around the world. Please welcome the Fantastic Four.
And last but not least, we have... Hey, Doug, hey, yoo-hoo, hey, yeah? I know you've had your preamble before each of these movies. Do you mind if I cover this one? Okay. Yes! Today we're talking about Fantastic Four First Steps, the MCU's first film after reclaiming the characters from 20th Century Fox. So after going through all of these movies, I was really excited to see how Marvel would tackle the first family. We've seen so many iterations of how you could do this family, and now we are here. Question is, I guess, where do you go? Before the merger even occurred, I've been reading online that plans were discussed to do yet another reboot, but instead of focusing mainly on the main Fantastic Four group, it would be centered on Franklin Richards, the son of Sue and Reed Richards. I don't think that's a terrible idea, but the problem is you usually do that if you've had a successful run of the characters first. We've had many starts and stops over and over again with the Fantastic Four. What do you really do with the Fantastic Four now that you have it within the MCU? A lot is riding on this because the last couple of years with Marvel, things haven't been going that smoothly since the end of Endgame. So their plans moving forward was to reintroduce the Fantastic Four into the world of Marvel. We've gotten little glimpses before, one from Doctor Strange, one from Deadpool and Wolverine, and this time embrace the comic element of the time period in which they were introduced. Make it be set in the 60s. Really embrace the 60s-ness of it all. And honestly, I thought it was so inspired of a choice. Because if we look at the slate of films that the MCU has done up to this point, while I have liked a lot of Marvel's movies, we were starting to get a homogenized, kind of samey feel and look and tone to these. It wasn't really embracing what these comics could be. To set the Fantastic Four in this futuristic 60s, I thought was terrific. What you could do with technology, the clothing, the media that was presented. I like seeing the old school ads that were like placed throughout. Even like the editing choices. It looked like old school news programs that you could find on YouTube right now. It was just so cool. Honestly, I kind of wish we had a bit more time in this world, but that's something that we could discuss now with our board. Story. Essentially, this film is another attempt at telling the Galactus and Silver Surfer story that Fantastic Four Rise of the Silver Surfer tried to tell. There is no marriage subplot, but this time around, we are dealing with Reed and Sue having a kid. If we're diving into a brand new group and we're trying to do a new dynamic of these characters, it can be a little off-putting. It could be very much Superman 2025. Unlike Superman, I think that it works mostly fine because we've got a little bit of their origin story. You got to see tiny glimpses of their origin story told on TV and in pretty flawless exposition. It was done perfectly. The story itself is basic. You have the Fantastic Four doing their thing. The Silver Surfer shows up saying Galactus is a threat. You follow them up to space. They take on Galactus. It doesn't work, they return to Earth, and they deal with the repercussions of that until the final battle. It does lead to some very interesting conflicts with the family, which I think it leads to some very interesting questions. Would you have done the same thing? Spoiler alert, give up your kid to save the planet? I think works really well with the family. I think how they resolved the story wasn't the best. Skipping that aside, I think it probably is the strongest effort we've seen in terms of a story. 4 out of 4 Fantastic Fours. The family. So they're great. They all have such fantastic chemistry with each other. Personally, I don't think it's as strong as the 2005s, but I do also think that how it's presented, it is a lot more dynamic. I think everyone has been casted pretty well. And even the one that I was kind of skeptical about with Pedro Pascal, just because he's been so overexposed in the media, I thought he was okay. And I think that maybe Pedro Pascal and Vanessa Kirby's chemistry wasn't that strong all the time. It was strong enough. I think it was strong enough, but there were a couple scenes where I feel like I just kind of questioned whether it truly was as kinetic of a romance like they were trying to imply. Everyone gets a pretty good arc except for the Thing, and we could put a pin in this for now, see if I'm right. They are setting up a romance between him and Natasha Lyonne. My thought is maybe they're gonna do like a Captain America thing, where there is a romance set up, this whole multiversal adventure happens that separates them. The Thing is in our main MCU timeline, and his love is in the other, and there really is not an easy way to get back. So it will take multiple films to either get over the loss of this and maybe move on, maybe we'll see Alicia, or eventually he will go back to his original universe and he will get to live happily ever after with Natasha Lyonne. We'll put a pin in that for now, and I'm definitely excited to see where these guys go next within the main MCU timeline. A 3 out of 4 Fantastic Fours. Doom! He's not in this one. Well, that is technically not true. We do see a little glimpse of his hood in the post-credit scene. In terms of like the villain, I do think Galactus is great. And the change that they've done to the Silver Surfer in this world, I think that Julia Garner, she does fine in the role. If we're looking at like just an antagonist level, I think they do a fine enough job. I would give them a 3 out of 4 Fantastic Fours, but I'm using Doom as the template. I would have to give it a 1 out of 4 Fantastic Fours. So this one is a very mixed bag because I like the design of this world. I like that they use a lot of practical sets. They have a lot of practical props. It all looks fantastic. But at times it does look very CGI. Even like Galactus, even though that is a man, like a man in a costume, and they're kind of doing a modern like Godzilla thing with him, it just looks fake sometimes. And the look of the Thing, it is mostly practical. It is a guy in a costume, but they do use CG as well. And they really capture the look of the Jack Kirby illustration. It separates him from like the previous film iterations that we've gone so far. I like the look. A 3 out of 4 Fantastic Fours. That would tally in a final score of 11 out of 16 Fantastic Fours. And look, this is kind of a no-brainer here. So that brings us to our final Fantastic Four film ranking. This board is never wrong. This was tough to do because I did like the 2005 Fantastic Four. It was, in my mind, a great film, but I think we finally got a good adaptation on the big screen. I can't wait to see what they do next. This has been a really interesting journey, like going through every single one of their films. Like, it really has made me appreciate these characters and their on-screen history so much more. Back to you, Doug. Thank you, Doug. So, that's all Fantastic Four films currently up to date. What is your favorite Fantastic Four film? Comment below, let me know. That's all the time we have for today here on Film Stash. My name is Douglas Campbell, and if you excuse me, I'm gonna add to the stash.